right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can follow me on Twitter at bdomenech. You can email us at bigben@fox.com. Subscribe to my newsletter at The Transom at thetransom.com, and you can subscribe to The Spectator, where I'm editor-at-large at thespectator.com. And today I'm talking to you about something that has roiled our entire cultural conversation, dominated the social currency of the nation, and really affected a lot of people in a negative way.
We begin with the backlash over a new ad campaign featuring actress Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, the ads are for American Eagle, and the tagline is, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. Now, in one ad, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed actress talks about genes as in DNA being passed down from her parents.
The play on words is being compared to Nazi propaganda with racial undertones.
The pun, good genes, activates troubling historical associations for this country. The American eugenics movement in its prime between like 1900 and 1940 weaponized the idea of good genes just to justify white supremacism.
Despite that backlash, American Eagle stock has been soaring.
And of course it would be soaring because it's a good ad campaign, and who has bought American Eagle in quite some time? Look, the idea that this is some kind of Nazi dog whistle to the American right is the most absurd thing that I've seen from the American media in some time. And it also, I think, demonstrates the idiocy that the left is willing to stoop to now when it comes to weaponizing everything against the American right in a reactionary way, one that has nothing in common with the truth. Of course, the truth is that the American left has had ownership over eugenics and over the entire eugenics movement for as long as it has existed. When you look back at the actual original founders, for instance, of Planned Parenthood, their discussion of the need to eradicate human weeds and the like, it's something that is absolutely owned by the American left. And yet they're willing to engage in this absurd behavior at this moment around an ad campaign promoting genes, of all things, blue genes, things that are completely all-American, just as all-American, by the way, as Sydney Sweeney. Cut to.
Every name you mentioned got lost after you said Sydney Sweeney. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm also straight.
You know.
Yeah. It's all right. I'm a committed married man, but I'm not blind.
Me too. I mean, I got best dad ever here. You have three kids now. I've got 3 kids.
Oh, God, it's
honestly,
the best.
like you mentioned the cast, and after saying Sydney Sweeney, you sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. Just it's all went. Yeah, it's all done. Yeah.
That's Rich Eisen talking to Paul Walter Hauser, great actor. It's one of these situations where the left just has to take everything that is basically normal, well-adjusted, and completely, in the realm of American conversation, and they have to find something that's wrong with it. Sydney Sweeney's a decent actress. She's an attractive woman. Of course, every straight man loves Sydney Sweeney. But also, what are you offended about when it comes to Sydney Sweeney? Like, why would you say that invoking her in some way, just because she's blonde and has blue eyes, is an indication that you're embracing the swastika? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's out of touch with everything that a normal person thinks when they see an ad for blue jeans. I mean, there's nothing that comes out of this that is in any way an indication of some kind of fascist approach to eugenics or to perfection or to the way that we think about our fellow humans. And yet the left has to turn it into something that is objectionable and bad. This is their problem. A Democratic Party is not going to be a majority party until they can get back to the idea that they are accepting of people who serve in the military, of police, firefighters, first responders, of the American flag, of the Bible, of the church, and of the idea that the American family is a very good thing and that upholding them is something that government policy ought to do. The fact that the left can't accept that they can't come around to the idea that these fundamental things that have always been at the center of American life are good things that are not problematic, that we don't have to find some kind of element of fascism, of patriarchy, of sexism, of misogyny, of racism, etc., and etc. As long as they are holding to those views, they are going to be a minority party. I don't know if anybody who is on that side of the aisle listens to me, but if they do, I hope that they work within their party to try to readjust the direction that they're taking. Because the more that you're complaining about Sydney Sweeney and holding her up as being something that is fascist and an indication that you're wearing not just red hats, but swastika hats and the like, the more you're going to shrink your base, shrink your coalition, and turn off the very young men who you need in order to become a majority party again. I'm Ben Dominich. You're listening to The Big Ben Show. We'll be back with Byron York and Lucas Tomlinson right after this. And we are back on The Big Ben Show. I am happy to welcome my friend and someone who I've admired my entire career, Byron York. He is chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. You can follow him on X at Byron York. I have loved his work ever since I read his article about the downfall of the American Spectator many, many years ago, which he is laughing about because it's just an iconic piece of writing and journalism. Byron, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Ben.
I want to talk to you about what's been playing out over the past week or so regarding John Brennan and the revisiting of Russiagate, a story that you have covered intensely over the past several years, one that you obviously invested a lot of time in, and has become something that, I mean, I never thought that something like this would be so sprawling, that it would encompass so many years of our lives. And obviously the revelations that were laid out there by the head of DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, from the White House, and in the form of the release of a number of different pieces of material that we had not yet seen before, was revelatory. Tell me a little bit about your reaction to that. And also, can you give us some context about just the nature of the rumors surrounding Russiagate that led to this point? Because there were so many people who said starting a couple of years ago, including Lee Smith, including, some of our other colleagues, that there was something more going on, that this was even higher level than perhaps we had understood in terms of the warping of intelligence surrounding Russiagate.
Yeah, I think there are two things that we've learned more about, and I think we can say are just absolutely confirmed now. Is one, they used the Steele dossier to make their determination that Vladimir Putin was trying to help Donald Trump win the presidency. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that Obama was behind it. They weren't really freelancing. They were operating under a presidential directive when they did this. So these are things, and I think back to really 2016. If you go back to the spring of 2016, Robbie Mook, remember Robbie Mook?
Oh man, that's a callback.
Hillary Clinton's campaign manager basically said after the first of the leaks about the DNC that Vladimir Putin was trying to get Donald Trump elected, and he essentially plants this story in the political world, and boy does it grow from there. And I remember trying to figure out when we found out that there was a dossier, what it was used for. And there were two places that you could go for information that were investigating this. One was the House Intelligence Committee, which was chaired by Devin Nunes at the time. And the other was, and also Kash Patel was a top staffer, maybe the top staffer on the House Intel Committee. And the other was the Senate Judiciary Committee with Charles Grassley, who was looking into this. And they kind of complemented each other in the sense that there were things that the Senate could do that the House couldn't do. And there were things that the House could do, like issue a quick subpoena, that the Senate couldn't do. And they were trying to figure this out. And the interesting thing is, in 2017, the Republican Party controlled the Justice Department. President Trump controlled the executive branch, and they were getting totally stonewalled by the FBI especially, but by the whole intelligence community and the Justice Department as a whole, basically being run by Rod Rosenstein, who was number 2 to Jeff Sessions. So this was just kind of beating their head against the wall. But there was always this suspicion that they used the dossier for more than they would say, because they denied it so much, and they and also the dossier seemed to just establish the framework of where they went. That is, claiming this long-standing relationship between Trump and Russia, claiming that there was some sort of deal by which, if Trump is elected, he would remove all sorts of U.S. sanctions on Russia. And then finally, that Russia had something on Trump, and that was the infamous P tape, which was a video, surreptitiously recorded video of Trump and prostitutes engaged in kinky sex acts in a Moscow hotel room. I think it was in 2013. And so those were kind of the foundations of the dossier, and those were kind of the foundations of how they were approaching, they meaning Democrats and their allies in the press, meaning most of the press, this whole Russia thing.
I want to play for you some audio from a House hearing in May of 2017. This is cut 8.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
So we know that that's not true now.
Correct.
Byron, I have a question for you. Who was the first person to tell you about the dossier?
It was somebody in the Senate, actually. It was
okay.
Somebody in the Senate. And what was happening, and by the way, I don't want to let
Can I tell you who was the first person to tell me about the dossier?
What was your first time, Ben?
It was the editor of The Atlantic.
Oh, really? The current editor of The Atlantic?
Yes, followed quickly by the current editor of The Bulwark. So look, I mean, this thing was clearly being marshaled to, incite people to react to it, incite members of the Senate, politicians, etc., to react to it by people who were saying, in whispered tones, well, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this story? Do you know about this story? And it's almost certainly true, because it comes through, respected people within the intelligence community.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
that was my experience, at least.
They were desperate to get it into the political bloodstream.
Yeah.
And at a time when I didn't know about it, they were pushing hard. And by they, I mean mostly Christopher Steele and his Fusion GPS colleague, Glenn Simpson, former Wall Street Journal reporter, who plays a major role in trying to get this dossier out. And as September of 2016 approached, and, if you remember, the conventional wisdom was that Hillary Clinton was going to win. But still, Steele was desperate to get this out, and Simpson arranged a meeting in September between Steele, who flies over to the United States for this, and a number of journalists, and I believe they're kind of the usual suspects, the New York Times, Washington Post. I think Mike Isikoff is there, David Korn of The Nation is there, and there's some I'm forgetting right now. And he's desperate. Steele is desperate to get them to write about this, and by and large, they don't.
Yeah.
To their credit, by and large, they don't.
Especially to Isikoff's credit, I think that he clocked it as being there's something that smells wrong about this.
That's right, and later on we can get to the great public service that was actually performed by BuzzFeed in actually making the dossier public, so we could all see why any good journalist would look at this and say, I don't know about this. I'm sure not going to report it under my name. David Korn wrote a piece attributing it to a Western intelligence source, but it wasn't very hot, didn't get any attention. And so what had happened was the election came and went, and Steele had failed to inject the dossier into the American political conversation. And then the worst happened. Donald Trump won, and that's when they started to use it to try to bring down Trump as opposed to prevent his election.
Well, the thing that was so fascinating about this to me was that, like, I don't think that there was quite as much awareness on the part of the American people about the level to which people will stoop to try to influence things and influence the conversation, who come with bearing all sorts of different plaudits and credits to their name, and then use those to essentially try to pervert our process. And I feel like what happened was people sort of slowly started to wake up to that and start to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't really pass the smell test. Why are we supposed to be trusting these people who, Western intelligence sources, people along those lines,
right.
As opposed to folks who we actually know and can come out and make the case for it. Instead, it's supposed to be, we're supposed to trust you. We're supposed to trust Adam Schiff. We're supposed to trust John Brennan. And I think that really was something that changed the minds of a lot of Americans, particularly, by the way, Americans who are right of center, whose natural tendency tends to be to trust intelligence community people, to trust, Justice Department folks.
Right. Well, you have to remember, this is going down memory lane, but in 2016, before the election, when the dossier comes to them, the FBI likes it so much that they hire Christopher Steele.
Yep.
They put him on the payroll. And then he messes up by arranging this press meeting I was just talking about, because part of his arrangement with the FBI is that he will not discuss this with the media. So what the FBI does is they say, oh, you broke the rules, and they fire him, and then they open up a back channel to him to get the same stuff from him. And what I think the time we all became extremely aware of this is that on January the 6th of 2017, Trump is president-elect, 2 weeks away from becoming president. I write about this a lot in my book about this obsession. And the intel chiefs decide that they're going to confront Trump with the most salacious allegation of the dossier, which is the P-tape story. And they decide to have Comey do it. And Comey meets with his Crossfire Hurricane team, and they view this as an ambush criminal interview of Trump, not a briefing of the president-elect. This is a criminal interview. So they make a careful plan about how Trump is going to do, about how Comey's going to do it. Comey later said that he was worried that Trump might react badly and think that Comey was trying to, quote, pull a J. Edgar Hoover on him, which is exactly what Comey was doing. So anyway, they go to Trump Tower. There's a meeting with the intel chiefs. And then toward the end, Comey said, I'd like to meet with the president-elect one-on-one, just the two of us, to discuss something. And Trump's team they're looking at each other saying, what's going on? And Trump says, okay, it's fine, we'll do it. So everybody leaves. They go out in the hall, and Trump and Comey are together in the room. And that's when Comey tells Trump about the P tape. And Trump he doesn't like explode in anger. And I talked to people, who saw him at that time. He doesn't explode in anger. He's kind of baffled. And everybody, the first thing they think is that Trump was a famous germaphobe. And they say, man, he's not doing this P tape thing. It's just not happening. And I mean, they can't believe that, so. And meanwhile, the meeting ends. Comey runs down. There's an FBI SUV waiting for him to take him to the FBI office. And he's got a laptop up and running. And he immediately begins to type in the back of the SUV everything that he can remember that Trump has said, which they're going to write up and possibly use against the president-elect in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And then, to wrap this thing up, that's on the 6th. 3 days later, amazingly enough, we see on CNN that the intel chiefs have presented Trump with this, what was the word they used? This spectacular allegation, this potentially very damaging allegation, which is so secret that we can't tell you what it is, but believe us, it's really bad.
It's really bad.
They go on about this, and they never tell you exactly what it is, but it's really super duper bad. And then, to his credit, Ben Smith says, screw it, we have the dossier. We have,
at BuzzFeed at the time. Yes.
Cell phone photo of it at BuzzFeed, and they just published the dossier, which was an act of public service. There have been reports that the people at CNN were very angry about that because they could no longer do their cherry-picked, string people along thing about, it's something really serious. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, people could see the dossier and began to make their own judgments. So that's a long description of what happened between, say, the late summer of 2016 and the time that Trump is inaugurated.
So the thing that one of the things that I remember at the time was the lack of clarity and the just trust us, this is terrible. Narrative that was being advanced primarily on CNN and via all of these different people. I'm naturally a pretty skeptical person, Byron, when it comes to things. I want to have proof. I want to read the evidence myself. When you saw this coming across the lines, was your initial reaction one of, there's just something wrong about it? It doesn't track. It doesn't seem right. And it seems a lot too convenient for the narrative that these people would like to advance about the incoming president.
Yeah, well, there's several things that seem fishy about the dossier. And by the way, one of the things that the people who put together the dossier used was they took factual events. Say that Carter Page went to Moscow at this time, and then they say this happened. And then you can say, well, hey, it's true. Carter Page was in Moscow at this time. How are you saying this is not true? But one of the things that was quickly provable was that there was a claim in the dossier that Michael Cohen, who at the time was a loyal Trump retainer, had gone to Prague and had worked out this deal between basically Trump and Putin, by which Trump would pay off, I mentioned earlier, pay off Putin if in exchange for Putin's help in winning the U.S. election, Trump would pay off Putin by terminating a lot of U.S. sanctions. And so the quick thing is, hey, Michael, have you ever been to Prague? And the answer was no. And actually, right after the meeting, when this first comes out, they they send Cohen running over to his apartment to get his passport. Can you bring it here? Can you show us your passport? Well, sure, I'll show you your passport. So this was something that gave the Trump people something to hold on to. It was some provably false allegation in the dossier, which was the first thing that the Trump people could point to and say this is false, other than the big picture, which was, no, there's no deal with Russia. But here was a particular that they could say, and then at least the defenders of the dossier on MSNBC and et cetera had to say, well, maybe the Prague detail is not correct, but everything else is right. But that was the beginning of a very long death process for the dossier.
So the thing about this that I find to be a question that I have struggled to answer, and Hugh Hewitt asked me this on Friday. I've been asked it on Fox as well, is about motivation. And I want to play something from John Brennan again for you to respond to. Cut 7.
He is, I think, the most divisive president we've ever had in the Oval Office. He is feeding and fueling hatred and animosity and misunderstandings among Americans.
Is this just a situation where you have a Democrat, someone who has a past history of being a pretty radical leftist, put in a position of power where they could use that against a Republican president who they viewed as an existential threat to the Constitution or to the country?
Well, you teed me up there. The world may not know this, but next year will be the 50th anniversary of John Brennan voting for Gus Hall, the Communist Party USA candidate for president of the United States in the 1976 election.
Which by the way, I just want to interject. Voting for the communist in 1976 means something. Okay, if you vote for the communist in 1988, I'm more likely to forgive you than you are in 1976 because it means something in 1976. But go ahead.
And he looked at Jimmy Carter and he looked at Jerry Ford, and that's not the greatest choice in the world. But then he said, I'll just be a communist. And he says he never was a communist, by the way. He was disillusioned with the system. But, I think it was more than just partisan politics. I do think that, and I know you've thought about this a lot. I've thought about this a lot. I've thought, why did they go so nuts about Trump? I mean, why did they just lose it completely about Trump? Now, in the Republican Party, Trump, as you know, did threaten a lot of Republican orthodoxies on issues like
it's one of the reasons
trade.
I was opposed to him in 2016. It's one of the, I was very concerned about what he would do if he got into office, but I also believed that, he represented a very real movement in the country, and I think that, people try to revise the National Review cover that I contributed to as being a never Trump cover, but in reality, along with Yuval Levin and a number of other people who wrote there, I said, if he's the nominee, he's better than Hillary. so it was one of those things, But anyway, go ahead.
In the end, it's a binary choice. But he did threaten a lot of Republican orthodoxy on issues like immigration, trade, foreign entanglements, even entitlements and entitlement spending. Let's just say he was not on the Paul Ryan track. And so one Republican said to me at the time that Trump had basically rolled a grenade into the AEI lunchroom, meaning
that is an insightful Republican, whoever said that to you.
That was pretty much what happened. So he represented this kind of an existential threat. Democrats they did hate him for just partisan reasons. And the Russia thing was a great, tool to use, a cudgel to use against Trump. But Republicans, I think, their way of life and their way of making a living was really threatened by Trump. So you did see this mix of the resistance on the left and sort of classic just Democratic opposition, and then never Trumpers in the conservative party, where you still see that division. Basically, the never Trumpers are pretty small now. A lot of them just became Democrats, which is another way to deal with the problem. But he represented such a threat. So that's the only, we got on this by asking, why did they go so crazy about him? Why did they just lose it? And that's the only way I can think about it.
Consequences. So we see this report from the DNI. We see the immediate rush of all the people who had been saying these things before coming out and defending their past statements, or saying that, this is an exaggeration, etc. What, if anything, will be the consequence to learning, essentially, that the claims that people had from before, that this came from the highest levels, was something that was actually directed and not just ginned up by members of the intel community, that it didn't come from Peter Strzok, but that it was something that came at their direction? I mean, there has to be some kind of consequence. Can't there be, Byron, here? Or is this a situation where everyone's just going to kind of push this under the rug?
Ben, I think that is a failure of the imagination on your part. No, I don't think there are going to be any consequences. Look, we had, go back to the Iraq War, and a lot of people on the Republican side were strongly supporting George W. Bush. And there were people who pushed and pushed and pushed a narrative of Iraq that turned out to be false. And the President of the United States started a major war over it, and 4,000 plus Americans died in it. And they really didn't, a lot of the promoters of the war didn't really suffer much consequences at all. As a matter of fact, some of them are now the major anti-Trump voices, as a matter of fact. So, in terms of consequences, like people losing their jobs or enduring disgrace or being cast out of this or that for accusing Trump of being a Russian asset, as was popular to say back at the time. No, I don't think they're going to face any consequences.
Mm-hmm. It really just seems to me to be a pathetic result, given the fact that, you and I know these institutions have been part of an overall decline in the faith that Americans have in virtually every institution over the past 20 plus years. And you can even go back further. I mean, you can really go back all the way to Watergate, but it's or the Kennedy assassination. But the truth is that these institutions have seen a collapse in any kind of faith, and yet they are the ones that we depend on when we make fundamentally huge decisions as a nation, as it relates to foreign policy, etc. And I am not an anarchist. I have friends who are anarchists, but I am not an anarchist, and I want to have faith in these institutions. My friend Michael Malice, loves this stuff because he just wants, anarchy. But the point is that I would like to get back to a point where we could have some faith in the FBI and the CIA, I'm an 80s baby. I love, I still rock out to Van Halen's Panama, that's that kind of thing. This is a point where I want to have faith in the CIA and the FBI and our Defense Department and others. How can we possibly get back to that, given the fact that there doesn't seem to be any real consequences for these people who lied to us for so long?
Well, I do think, and this is sort of the bigger question of the Trump era. Let's say it began in 2015 or 2016, and we're still in it now. And there's always been, ever since 2015, when I wrote my first Take Trump Seriously, he's doing really, really well story in May of 2015. And there were still people calling him a rodeo clown and all that stuff back then. But he, as I was saying before, he challenged so many what had been thought to be sort of rock solid orthodoxies of the Republican Party, and it's still not really settled because Trump has no philosophical system. He is an American leader, and I think he's deeply, deeply American. But in terms of having a philosophy and living according to it, like a political philosophy, I just don't see that. Never have. So there were, at the very beginning, there were people who were planning for this to be over, that were hoping after the election in 2016, Trump would lose, and then we could just go back to where we were. And that didn't happen. And then there were thoughts that, okay, after Trump loses in 2020, okay, then we can go back to where we were. That didn't happen. And then there were hopes that he could be defeated in 2024, and then we could go back to where we were. And this hasn't happened because where we were was a pretty bad place. The Republican Party was in a disastrous position when Trump stepped in, and the Democratic Party was going crazy. So I think we're just in one of these turbulent periods, and they happen in history, and they're no fun, and nobody knows when they're happening. Nobody knows when they're going to end, which is my way of saying I have no idea. But we are in this really turbulent moment, and it's going to take a while for things to settle out.
Byron York is chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. You can follow him on X at Byron York. He is a must follow and must read. And you can also subscribe to his newsletter at the Examiner, which I subscribe to. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, Byron.
Thank you, Ben. I always enjoy talking. Really appreciate it.
Great. We'll be back with more of the Big Ben Show right after this. Joining me now in the D.C. Bureau, my friend Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News correspondent. You can follow him at Lucas Fox News on X. Lucas, I want to talk to you about a couple of different things that are going on. But first off, I got to ask you about this whole thing that played out last week with Tulsi Gabbard and the revelations that she released. Got some obvious heat in terms of reaction from the White House press corps. And let me play you just quickly a callback to some of the things that CIA head John Brennan had to say. Cut 7.
He is, I think, the most divisive president we've ever had in the Oval Office. He is feeding and fueling hatred and animosity and misunderstandings among Americans. Well, I think there's a big question, first of all, in terms of those who are on Mr. Trump's national security team, whether they can continue to serve in good conscience an individual who basically betrayed his nation. What Mr. Trump did yesterday was to betray the women and men of the FBI, the CIA, NSA, and others, and to betray the American public. And that's why I use the term that this is nothing short of treasonous, because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and it needs to stop. And Mr. Trump needs to understand that there are going to be consequences for him, too.
John Brennan obviously is at the center of this story. He is someone who has been a prominent figure in Washington for a very long time. And I recall the controversies that happened surrounding him that stretched back to when he had to admit to Dianne Feinstein that they spied on members of Congress and congressional staff during the course of the investigation into the torture situation that happened during the War on Terror. Brennan is someone who has kind of skated above this and continued to be an outspoken critic of the president, despite the fact that it seems more and more like he participated in actions that, for any normal government employee, it seems like there would be consequences. Are there going to be any consequences for John Brennan or for any of these other people who are mentioned or included in the different documents that the DNI released?
Well, Ben, it's great to be back. It certainly feels like there will be political consequences. We know that nobody's probably going to jail over this.
Mm-hmm.
This will be carried out in the court of public opinion. A lot of people are questioning the timing of this release, given the increased focus on the Epstein files. All of a sudden, we have the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, coming out on a Friday afternoon with major accusations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was followed up by, for many days, a lot of reporters were wondering, where's the press conference? Where's the evidence? Then she did come out at the White House last week and appeared to have the goods. She had this House Oversight Committee, House Intelligence Committee report that had been locked away at Langley for many years. Some people were wondering, where was this during the first term when the Republicans had the keys to that vault? You have a take on that, Brent?
What is a turducken safe? Can you explain that to me, Lucas? It's a safe inside a safe.
Right. And certainly when it comes to Brennan, a lot of CIA directors, of course, are political appointees. Brennan was no exception, however, had a history at the agency. He was an analyst. Some former Trump officials I spoke to were saying that he is not as guilty as some of the others, which I found interesting. Clapper and others, Comey, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly revisiting this has opened up,
a ton of different reactions. And I think people... This is the frustration that I think a lot of people have, and I would include, I have so many friends and people who I interact with regularly who are Trump supporters who come up and ask me questions, when I'm at the hardware store or when I'm, walking around my neighborhood or that kind of thing.
Southside.
And they ask me something along the lines of, why do these people get no consequences? Like, why is there nothing that happens to people who basically threw our political situation into a cocked hat for years? I mean, and not just 4 years, by the way. It continued beyond his presidency. The idea that Donald Trump was a Russian asset, that Vladimir Putin had, material that he could use against him. I will tell you this. I have heard from the highest levels of Republicans within the House and the Senate repeated the ideas that were being espoused by John Brennan at the time, that this is a guy who is compromised, who has something that is being used against him. And these are not dumb people, okay? And, to me, I look back at that and I say, this is horrendous. Yeah. This is horrible. There needs to be some kind of consequence for this. And it makes me think of, I'll tell you, it makes me think of the most is there were no real consequences, when it comes to lying to Congress. Eric Holder lied to Congress, okay? He lied about the whole situation with Mexico and the guns and everything like that. He lied to them. He was found by Congress, they voted on this, guilty of lying to them, of misleading them, and of being found, actually, responsible for that action. And then they didn't do anything about it because, in the old days, if you were found in contempt of Congress, you could be thrown into jail. There's actually a jail, that they can put you in. But they didn't do that because that's not the way that we do things now in the swamp. To me, there should be consequences for these people, and it should be beyond, the political ramifications or the career ramifications. I mean, these people are still going to be giving speeches at the Aspen Institute next year.
Collecting big checks for some of those speeches.
Yeah.
There's no question. And where did this all start? This started with the Steele dossier, unverified intelligence that made its way into this gigantic intelligence community assessment. Matt Taibbi's done some good reporting on this.
Yep.
He's been banging the drum loud. He shares your frustration, Ben. And the conversations I have with people are very similar. At the same time, I have conversations with other people who say this has been already investigated to death. Durham report, we had the Mueller report, and the Senate Intelligence Committee, which Marco Rubio was the chairman of, now the Secretary of State. It feels like it's almost like COVID in a way. There are some people that just don't want to go back. They just want to go forward. That is what the feeling is at times. Even though when you see some of these revelations, you see this House Intelligence Committee report that's been squirreled away, you're like, where was this before?
Mm-hmm.
But then you speak to some members of Trump's first term who says nothing new here. So that's been an interesting part of this too. Andrew McCarthy, not in Trump's first term, but has written, hey, it's in my book. We explored all this. Nothing new here. And the timing of it is certainly raises some suspicions.
Look, I think that one of the things that is incredibly infuriating about this, and should be, is that because this is such a complicated story, and because it has so many different, it's a maze. It's all these different things that you can go, all these rabbit holes that you can go down. I feel like the people who wanted to make this story play the way that they wanted it to play out, and the way that it did play out, they get the advantage. They get the win. They get the feeling that, in the words of John Brennan, but it feels right, doesn't it? It rings true, doesn't it? And that's essentially what they get away with. And the next time that they come to us and they say something one way or the other about something another nation is doing, or the reason that we need to get involved in a conflict, or that we need to act in some way militarily,
slam dunk.
Exactly. I mean, that's you and I are of the generation. We remember this.
Sure.
We loved Colin Powell. I don't know about you, but I love Colin Powell. I trust Colin Powell. When he says this is happening, I believe this is happening. And yet, now it's like we look at this and we say, how can we have any kind of faith in the people that we pay to, tell us, the American people, and members of Congress, our, top leaders and people who make decisions about this, when we need to act.
And yet, isn't this why President Trump is back in the White House for a second time?
It is.
And when you ask about, where's the justice, it's a big reason he's back. People look back on the charges against him, the FBI raiding his house. This is one of the reasons they're back. People do not trust the system. They elected Donald Trump to go back and fix the system. And I guess we're back to where we started.
I'm worried that the system is not being fixed. I'm worried that this is a temporary situation, and that as soon as these people are out of power or not in these roles, then we're not going to get the truth about different things, and we're going to be right back where we started.
Well, this is depressing.
So, NFL camps are starting up again. You and I both have been paying attention, I'm sure very close attention, to the situation regarding the Washington Commanders and one Terry McLaurin, their wide receiver, who wants a new deal. He reportedly wants something along the lines of the DK Metcalf deal, the $33 million that he got, I believe, from the Steelers. What's your attitude toward that situation right now?
Well, Ben, I've done a 180 on this one.
Okay.
And I love Terry McLaurin. I want to state unequivocally on the record.
17's a great guy. Yeah.
Big Terry McLaurin fan. He's under contract this year. And last night, my son's baseball practice, I was talking about it with the coach, and he was like, he's under contract. And I was like, that's it. And we were talking about a guy who's under contract should be playing. Here's a problem I have. It was just a few years ago, he received the largest signing bonus of any wide receiver in NFL history, about $28 million, as part of a $70 million salary. The man has been paid. He wants a contract extension. There's no question. He's going to be 30 years old in September, and that seems to be one of the big sticking points that not even Terry can correct.
The age is the issue, I think.
Huge issue. Listen, he didn't have his first season in the NFL till he was 24 years old. He's 29. He's about to be 30, and there's no question the Commanders' front office is looking at that and has the data that, true story, when the older you get, the slower you get.
Mm-hmm. But the situation here, though, is you have this guy who's been the heart of the offense playing with terrible quarterback play for a very long time. He finally gets a season with a good quarterback. He proves what he can do in that season. So isn't it incumbent on this front office to look at this situation and say, we don't want to have bad vibes going into the second year with Jaden. We got a game away from the Super Bowl with this team, and we upgraded our offensive line.
Big time.
We upgraded, I think, frankly, their offense with both the addition of Deebo and the fact that they, I think, had a pretty good draft. In addition, they're very high on this running back that was a little bit older and got picked late. Don't you not want to mess with the vibes going into this kind of season?
And Terry's been clever. I think the hold in, as they're calling it, coming back to camp, signing autographs every day. Certainly doesn't seem like there's any ankle problems walking over to the fans, just watching that gate. It's clever. Also, it stops the clock on the fines because he's getting $50,000 fine. At some point, that becomes real money, I'm sure. We need him. There's no question. Need Terry McLaurin. You just need to work something out. You saw the big contract with Sutton in Denver. I don't think we need to go that low. Terry's a much better receiver than him. 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons with some quarterbacks that certainly aren't Jaden Daniels. By the way, the Von Miller press conference, that was incredible. I was driving my son to baseball practice. What a man. I mean, I've heard a lot about him over the years.
So it's so funny because 3 weeks ago somebody asked me, or 4 weeks ago somebody asked me, what's the one thing that you would do at this point with the team? And I said, I think they need a vet rusher who just wants 6 or 7 more
Shadow
sacks.
General manager over
and sure enough, right after that, they signed Von Miller, and it's like there you go, 6 or 7 more sacks right there.
Yeah, they'll just bring him in on third down.
Look, I am as high on this team as I have ever been. I just don't want them to disrupt it with a stupid non-move.
They got to find some middle ground here.
Okay. All right.
Deron Payne was just interviewed where he says, I'm in last year of my contract, my 8th year in the league. I've got all the money I want. And that made me go into what Terry has made. He's made a lot of money. I think, 50, 60, $70 million. You can live on that.
Okay. Look, I
just get an extension, something fair. You want something fair.
All right.
Isn't that the old Jack Welch, the contract negotiation?
Yeah.
Pay me what's fair.
No,
because all those top receivers that you mentioned earlier, DK, others, Jamar Chase, they're all younger. They're all in their 20s, 25, 28.
They all are, and I know that factors into all this. This has been Commanders Talk on the Big Ben Show with Lucas Tomlinson. You can follow him on X at Lucas Fox News. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me again, Lucas.
Ben, always a pleasure.
Galactus asked too high a price.
Well, what does he want?
What did he ask? He said, give us your child, and I will spare the earth. What's the plan?
I am not giving him up.
The idea is simple. Hand over their baby, and we all live.
I will not sacrifice my child for this world. But I will not sacrifice this world for my child. We will face this together as a family.
So the Fantastic Four premiered this weekend, and I was happy to see it on Friday and came out of it, I have to say, the happiest that I've been since coming out of a Marvel movie since Avengers Endgame 6 years ago. It is an incredible movie. It's not something that's going to be, on that same level of epic nature, the end of a story or something like that. But it's almost as if Marvel Studios decided together under Kevin Feige that they were going to respond to every single critique that they have as a studio. That they can't tell a linear story, that you need to have watched 40 other things in order to understand what's going on, that they can't have quality actors in major roles, that instead it's about visuals and the like, that every male lead has to be this quippy person in the nature of Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Paul Rudd and Chris Pratt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that they can't have something that aesthetically looks incredible versus the muddy CGI that they've become known for with all of their mid-tier products over the past decade. Fantastic Four is incredible. It's so impressive. It's such a great movie. And it's also something that is meant clearly to appeal to families. It's designed for you to be able to take your kids to it. The only deaths that happen are off screen and referenced to. It's actually less violent than The Incredibles, the Brad Bird Pixar movie that is a ripoff basically of the old Fantastic Four. And for someone like me who cares a great deal about these storylines and grew up reading the old comics on this, it was just a fantastic Saturday morning cartoon turned into live action. I have to say, the chemistry between the leads and between the team is so impressive, and it makes clear why the different movies that came before within this Fantastic Four genre, of which there have been many, because in part of the corporate interests involved and the need to retain the rights for the Fantastic Four, it shows why chemistry is so important within a team dynamic. I think that this is an incredible movie, and I think it's ultimately going to beat Superman by a lot at the box office internationally, because this is the sort of movie that you go to and then you say, I can bring my kids to this. And it's going to teach them some good lessons too. The thing that comes through very clearly right off the bat is that this is going to be a movie that actually establishes some emotional stakes. And for Marvel, that's always been a serious problem for them, because people basically had the attitude of anybody can come back. You know, there's no real risks involved. And here, there's a very different feeling. The third act has some issues. There's some editing issues, etc. There, you could make some changes here or there, but the aesthetic is amazing. It's a retro futurist dream, and I think that the people who are going to be cosplaying this are going to go ape over the different outfits and the different elements of this movie that are perfect for the kind of cosplay audience and for the people who love these types of throwback films. The decision to make this the way that they did and to make it a movie that is essentially about the world coming together around something, as opposed to being a movie like Superman where the world comes together to hate the protagonist, I think is just it's a polar opposite situation, and I couldn't be happier with the result. Just an astounding and surprisingly great entry into the MCU. I'm Ben Dominich. You've been listening to The Big Ben Show. You can email us, as always, at bigben@fox.com. We will be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.